Hi folks, my name's Sam from Helpful Home DIY. Today I'm going to show you how to put up corner angle beading. Now the thing with corner angle beading is there's many different ways to put it up. So if you've been following me recently, you'll know that I've recently plastered my dining room, and one job as part of that was putting up corner angle beading. So before I did so, I did a bit of research, spoke to some plasterers and had a bit of a look online on forums to see what other plasterers were doing. One thing that did strike me was there's actually many different ways to do it, and each plasterer chose one of those different methods and swore by it. Take this forum for example. As you can see, the discussion gets a little bit heated. Anyway, so instead of going over all of them on this video for you, I'll just go straight to me choosing the method that I used, and I'll explain how it worked, why it worked, and why I think that's best for the DIYer. And then after that, we'll explore the other options. We'll do a quick comparison, just for those of you that are interested. So I'm going to use scrim tape to hold it in place, and I will do that for all three sides. Okay. Once you've done that, stick it to the window. Okay, so that's that window done already. One thing I would say is, where possible, try to use complete lengths. Don't try and use up the short lengths, because you want it to be as straight as possible, not sort of, obviously that's an exaggeration, but you don't want it to kink. So I hope that gives you a clear idea of the ways I attach my beading to the corners, just using scrim tape. It's nice and simple, just slots on easily. The one thing you have to make sure of is that when you put your plasterboard in place, so just going back a step, that the vertical and the horizontal edges of the window recesses or whatever corner it is that you're forming is perfectly vertical or horizontal. When it comes to cutting angle bead, the best way to do it seems to work quite well. Good pair of snips. This is a good pair. Stanley Fat Max. I've had these for about 2 years and they work a treat. Anyway, you want to maintain this rim along the top here. Now that's the bit that's going to form the edge. That actually forms the corner. You don't plaster over that. In fact, if you do get any lumps of plaster on it after you've done the skim coat, you get a bit of sandpaper, take that back down to the metal, and the paint will end up covering that. The reason being is that just forms a perfectly good corner and the paint binds to it. So you want to make sure that these bits are left straight and true. The way to do that when you're cutting it is quite easily one side, the other side. So you've got two sides cut there, and then just very carefully snap it. And it snaps so easily, like that. So just bring it back and forth a few times. You don't need to twist it, back and forth, and then you'll see there's a nice snap on that. Now you might find, this is very slightly the case here, depends how fussy you are when it comes to the finish, but there is a slight burring going up there, so you can just take a farm to it if you're really fussy. Anyway, that's the way to cut beading. So that pretty much covers most things on attaching beading to plasterboard. I'm going to spend another 5 minutes just going into a bit more detail, exploring the other options, screw fix, nail, and stapler, believe it or not. If you're interested, hold on. If not, that's absolutely fine. I do always put a bit more information on my website. That's helpforhomedIY.co.uk. If you go to that, click on the how-to tab at the top, and it'll take you to the how-tos, and this will be included in one of them and have pictures and all the rest of it. Please remember to subscribe to my channel, like it as well, and if you have a comment, feel free to leave a comment and I'll try my best to get back to you. If you want to know more, hold on for another 5 minutes. So I just want to explain now the reasons why I used scrim tape, and it goes back to the plasterers forum. As you can probably tell if you do your own research, you'll find that you get plasterers giving lots of different views. So it can range from attaching beading using screws, clout nails, staples, adhesive, spray on adhesive. None of those are wrong, to be fair, to a certain degree. Obviously not going to go and use Pritt stick, but they all seem to be experienced, well-versed, professional plasterers by the most part. They just have their different ways of doing it. So if there's no set defined way of attaching beading, then what is it that the attachment is actually doing? Well, looking into it further, the attachment is really there just to hold the beading in place until you've skimmed over it with plaster. So really, as long as the attachment is firm enough so that it doesn't get knocked out of place when you plaster, then once the plaster's dried, it's fine. And what I found with the scrim tape is that the beading didn't budge at all when I plastered, and I knocked that bead, given that it's the first time that I plastered, so it did the job really well. And the other key consideration to take in mind is that this beading has holes in it, not only to put, say, screws, nails, whatever, to attach it to the plasterboard, but so that the plaster, the skim coat, actually binds to the plasterboard through these holes. With that in mind, using scrim tape, if I can find the end, if you go back to my last few videos back, I described scrim tape as a mesh, and that's what it is. It's got all these holes. The reason for that is so that the plaster can push through the scrim tape in between the holes and attach to the plasterboard underneath. So putting scrim tape like that, obviously you press it up against the plasterboard, that allows that to happen. There is one exception though, and that is along an edge for, say, an archway. Say you've got an open plan kitchen diner that's separated by an archway where the walls form the arch itself. So not a doorway that's surrounding a door frame to protect the edges of the walls, but rather it's actually the plasterboard. Now that sort of area is susceptible to being knocked, especially if you have kids, believe me. So in that sort of situation, it might be worth just using a more robust method to attach the beading to the plasterboard, and that seems to be the advice online. So in those situations, it might be best to use screws or nails. So what I'll do now is I'll just explore the other options of attaching beading to plasterboard, screws, nails and staples, just to see how easy it makes it attaching the actual beading, and just see how strong they are as well. So let's start with the clout nails. So remember, it's a corner that you're attaching to, but I'm just going to attach to one side, just one edge, just for display purposes. So put that up against there, pull a clout nail. Now bear in mind that actually, you know, you could have a piece 2 meters long, and you could be holding it up against the top of the window recess, for example, or along the side of a window recess, whatever. Either way, you've got to make sure you hold it in place whilst you get your clout nail and your hammer. So it can be a little bit tricky. I've seen some plasterers sort of hold it in place with their elbow, hold it in place with the elbow while they've got a count nail in that hand and they're hammering away, and it can get a bit awkward, but it's still easy to do. So, put up against there. Obviously you notice that there are lots of holes along this. And we'll just give that a tap. Now that goes in quite easy, but what I've found is you've still got a bit of movement. Obviously you'll do nails at various points going along, so that's fine. Looking on the back of the board, you can only just see the pinprick of the nail coming through there, and it's not split the board in any way. I'll just do another nail just to, well, for thoroughness really. Oops. Same again, no split in the plaster. That's firmly held on, although that said, with that bit of movement with driving the second nail in, the first nail has come out a bit. Let's just see what it's like pushing it out. Yeah, got a bit of movement there. See, so it doesn't take much for the nail to come back out. That's quite wobbly now. Bear in mind though, if it's a corner, we'll have nails in this side, which means it wouldn't be able to push out that way and therefore wobble these nails. Anyway, next method is the screws. Let's just snap this board. Okay. Piece of angle bead. Get some screws. The other thing about the nails is if you've got, say, a 2-3 mil adhesive gap behind the board, that is to say this is the brick wall, that's not touching the brick wall, you've got a couple of mil gap in between the wall and the board, then the depth of clamp nails you can use isn't much longer than 10mm. You've got a 12 mil thick board, a couple of mil, so you probably get away with 15mm clamp nails there, which makes them quite difficult to hold in place while you're hammering them, because unless you've got really tiny fingers, you're going to end up hitting your fingers. Not like this, the length of the screw, say, when you can hammer it without getting your fingers anyway. So it gets a bit fiddly. So put that there, get the screw. Whilst holding it in place, again, if you're holding it in place around a window frame, you're going to be using your elbow or whatever. I'm going to screw that in place. Push that up, screw some more. Right, okay, so that's not too bad. Let's do another one. You have to be careful with screws, because if you overscrew it, which is very easy to do, it just turns freely in the plasterboard there, so it chews up the plasterboard quite easily. Still not going anywhere though, to be fair. That was easier than the cat nails. Slight problem is, which is what I found, the heads stick out quite far. Just hold it up there. So the heads of the screws stick out quite far. Now, I think you can get some low profile head screws, not sure what they're called, for this, which means they don't stick out so far. But one thing to bear in mind with normal screws is, let's say it's time to skim coat the plasterboard. Well, those screws are getting in the way. So, another thing that people use are staplers. Believe it or not, plasterers swear by them. In fact, the plasterers seem to be more passionate about using staplers to fix it than anything else. I've got a normal box standard household stapler because This is for people doing DIY. So you're hardly going to go out and get a professional £70 stapler. Although I've never looked, you might be able to get a good one for £20. Now I suppose the beauty with the stapler is you're not trying to hold three things in place like the nails and the screws. With the nails and screws you're trying to hold the actual screw or nail, you've got to hold the beading and you've got to hold the hammer or the drill. With this you've just got to hold the beading and you've just got to hold the stapler. So let's give it a go. Obviously you want to aim the staples so they go on the holes. 1, 2. 2 as per the screws and nails, so keeping it the same amount of fixings here. That's fairly neat, low profile finish, not sticking out, great, nice and easy actually. Got a bit of wobble. The reason being is because, like with the screw and nail, I mean they filled those holes, so there wasn't much movement there. These staples give a pretty big amount of wobble, to be honest. Now it's not so much of an issue because if this is a corner, you're obviously stapling this side, which will prevent the beading from going in that direction, and the staples along this side will prevent the beading going in that direction. But we have got some up and down movement there, which will probably be okay if you've got long lengths, say 2 meters, where you've got lots of staples going along the length. That amount of staples will help keep it in position. But if you're doing a short length, I think you might go with a wobble. In terms of withdrawing it out, that's very easy. So, for the DIYer, I suspect you would need to buy a heavy duty stapler. In fact, I have bought one recently. I think it's about £50 with heavy duty staples. So let's give that a go. Fairly heavy duty. Okay. Again, same problem with the movement up and down. Try and withdraw it. Withdraws fairly easily. But that's not going to be so much an issue because you've got staples in both sides. Still quite an easy method though. There is one other product out there that kind of does the job that the scrim tape does, which is hook on angle bead. What that is there's slight or tiny little hooks on the length of the beading. And very much like the scrim tape method works, once you push it into place, those hooks slightly dig into the plasterboard, and you're allowed a bit of adjustment on that because you can push it in further and it'll just keep gripping it. That looks to be pretty good, although those pieces of beading are slightly more expensive than just standard beading, so it's something to bear in mind. And that concludes my video on using corner angle beads on plasterboard. As always, I give a little bit more information on my blog post on this topic, so you can visit my website www.helpforhomediy.co.uk. There's pictures there and a good description of things, and I go into a little bit more detail than I can in the YouTube videos. This is the 4th episode on a 6-part series taking you right from taking off the plaster in the first place right the way through to finishing off the plaster ready for painting. The next one in this playlist will come out next Saturday as usual, and that will cover skim coating the plasterboard. It's quite a big topic, there's quite a lot to cover as well, so make sure you subscribe to my channel and subscribe to the playlist as well, and you'll get notified when I come out with that video. It's always every Saturday. Thank you for watching, please subscribe to my channel, and I hope to see you again next Saturday.
Oh, I've cracked my phone.